Family ditched my wedding, calling it a pointless affair for a nobody like you, and told me to leave them alone. Then Dad shared Bahamas cruise photos with my sister's family. 1 month later, they called saying, "Where's the loan money?" So I replied, "Don't bother me with insignificant issues." The morning of my wedding day, July 15, in Bar Harbor, Maine, should have been perfect. The sky was a crisp, endless blue, the kind that makes you believe in promises. Gulls wheeled over the rocky coastline, their cries mingling with the soft crash of waves against the cliffs. I stood in my rented cottage, a quaint shingle-style hideaway overlooking Frenchman Bay, staring at myself in a full-length mirror. My dress, simple, with a lace overlay that caught the morning light, felt like a second skin, chosen for its quiet elegance rather than flash. At 32, I wasn't a starry-eyed bride chasing a fairy tale. I was Emily Harper, a social worker who'd clawed my way through a life of being overlooked, ready to marry Lucas Bennett, the man who saw me when no one else did. But perfection, I was about to learn, is a fragile thing, and mine was already unraveling. It started with the note. I found it slipped under the cottage door at 6:17 a.m., just as I was sipping coffee and trying to calm the butterflies in my stomach. The envelope was plain, cream-colored, with no name or address. My first thought was that it was a sweet gesture from Lucas, maybe a love letter to start our day. But when I tore it open, my breath caught. Scrawled in sharp, black ink were 6 words that turned my blood cold. "Leave Lucas, or you'll regret it." No signature, no explanation, just a threat that felt like a knife pressed to my throat. I read it again, my hands trembling, the paper crinkling under my fingers. Who would do this? And why today of all days? I glanced out the window, half expecting to see someone lurking in the foggy pines, but there was only the empty gravel path leading to the cliff's edge. I should have called Lucas right then, or my best friend Clara, but I didn't. I stuffed the note into my purse, telling myself it was a cruel prank, maybe a disgruntled client from work. As a social worker, I dealt with plenty of anger. Families I couldn't save, kids I couldn't protect. But this felt personal, like someone knew exactly how to puncture the one day I'd allowed myself to feel untouchable. Pushed it down, the way I'd always pushed down pain, and focused on getting ready. The wedding was at noon at the Otter Cliff Lighthouse, a historic beacon perched on a granite outcrop with the Atlantic as our backdrop. 80 guests, a string trio, and a reception at a local seafood shack we loved. Simple, heartfelt, us. I wasn't going to let a scrap of paper ruin it. But the note wasn't the only shadow. My parents, Margaret and Charles Dawson, weren't coming. They'd chosen a luxury cruise to the Bahamas with my brother Nathan's family instead. Nathan, their golden boy, the tech mogul who could do no wrong, had convinced them it was a once-in-a-lifetime trip. When I'd called my father to confirm, his voice had been cold, dismissive. "It's just a wedding, Emily," he'd said, as if I were planning a backyard barbecue. For a social worker scraping by, it's not exactly a high society event. Those words had burned, but they weren't new. My whole life I'd been the afterthought, the daughter who dared to choose a lesser path over the finance career they'd mapped out for me. Nathan got the lavish parties, the new cars, the down payments for his $1 million home. I got gift cards and half-hearted pats on the back. I tried to shake it off as I curled my hair, the scent of salt air drifting through the open window. Clara arrived at 7:30, her arms full of bagels and champagne, her blonde ponytail bouncing as she launched into a pep talk. "You're gonna be the most stunning bride Bar Harbor's ever seen," she declared, popping the cork. "And screw your parents. They don't deserve you." Clara had been my rock since college, the one who'd seen me cry after every family dinner where my achievements were brushed aside. She didn't know about the note, and I wasn't ready to tell her. Not yet. By 9 o'clock, my bridesmaids, Coworkers from the nonprofit where I worked, plus a few old friends, were bustling around the cottage, laughing, pinning up hair, and passing around mimosas. The energy was infectious, and for a moment I let myself believe the day would be okay. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Safe in Nassau. Weather's divine. Hope your little event goes well." Little event. The words hit like a slap, and I could picture her on the deck of some gleaming cruise ship, sipping a martini while Nathan's kids, Ava and Ethan, splashed in a pool. I deleted the message and turned off my phone, but the hurt lingered, a bruise I couldn't ignore. At 10:15, I was slipping into my dress when Clara handed me a small velvet box. "Something borrowed," she said, her eyes soft. Inside was a pearl necklace, her grandmother's, worn at her own wedding 50 years ago. "She'd have loved you," Clara said, fastening it around my neck. "She always said the best people fight for others, like you do." I hugged her, blinking back tears, grateful for the reminder that I had people who saw my worth, even if my own family didn't. But the note kept clawing at the edges of my mind. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and pulled it from my purse. The handwriting was unfamiliar, jagged, almost angry. "Leave Lucas or you'll regret it." What did they know about Lucas or about me? My past wasn't exactly a scandal. Small-town girl, steady job, no skeletons. But there were things I'd kept private. A bad breakup in my 20s, a client who'd threatened me last year after I reported neglect. Could this be connected? I stuffed the note back, my heart racing. I had to focus. The ceremony was an hour away. As we piled into the car to head to the lighthouse, the air felt heavier, the fog thicker. I was in the passenger seat of Clara's SUV, my dress carefully draped across the back, when I noticed the brakes felt wrong. They were soft, unresponsive, and as we rounded a curve on the cliffside road, Scudic Loop, with its sheer drop to the rocks below, the pedal went to the floor. "Clara!" I screamed, grabbing the dashboard. She pumped the brakes, her face pale as the car lurched forward, tires screeching. We were heading straight for the guardrail, the ocean yawning below. Clara yanked the emergency brake, and the SUV skidded to a stop inches from the edge. My chest heaved, my hands shaking as I stared at the jagged rocks 100 feet down. "What the hell was that?" Clara gasped, her knuckles white on the wheel. The bridesmaids in the back were silent, wide-eyed. I couldn't speak, my mind flashing to the note. This wasn't an accident. Someone had tampered with the car, but who, and how did they know where I'd be? We called roadside assistance, and a tow truck arrived within 20 minutes, but the driver's quick inspection confirmed my worst fear. The brake lines had been cut clean, deliberate. "You're lucky to be alive," he said, shaking his head. Clara insisted on calling the police, but I hesitated. A report would delay the wedding, and I wasn't ready to let this ruin everything. Not yet. We switched to another car, one of the bridesmaids' rentals, and made it to the lighthouse with minutes to spare. The ceremony site was breathtaking. Wild flowers in mason jars, wooden chairs arranged in neat rows, the lighthouse standing sentinel against the gray Atlantic. Lucas was waiting, his dark hair tousled by the wind, his smile so warm it almost melted the fear in my chest. He didn't know about the note or the brakes, and I couldn't bring myself to tell him, not when he looked at me like I was his whole world. But as I stepped out of the car, I saw the empty chairs in the front row, reserved for my parents. The sight hit harder than I expected, a physical ache in my ribs. They weren't coming. They'd chosen Nathan, Sophia, and their perfect little family over me. Again. I'd known it for weeks, but seeing those chairs, bare, untouched, made it real. My father's words echoed, a footnote for someone irrelevant. I straightened my shoulders, forcing a smile for Clara, who was watching me like she knew exactly what I was feeling. The string trio began playing, a soft rendition of Can't Help Falling in Love, and the guests rose. Lucas's parents, Susan and Robert, were in the front row, their faces beaming with pride. They'd stepped up in ways my own family never had, helping with everything from vendor calls to folding napkins for the reception. Susan had even sewn extra lace onto my veil, her hand steady and kind. "You're our daughter now," she'd said last night, and I'd nearly cried. Now, as I prepared to walk down the aisle, Robert approached, his gray eyes gentle. "Emily, I'd be honored to walk you if you'd like, or you can go solo, whatever feels right." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'd dreamed of my father giving me away, like he had for Nathan's wife Sophia at their extravagant Boston wedding. But that was a fantasy, not reality. "I think I need to do this alone," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But would you and Susan sit in those front row seats, the ones meant for my parents?" Robert's eyes misted. "We'd be honored," he said, squeezing my hand. As I started down the aisle, the fog parted and sunlight spilled across the grass. The guests' faces blurred, co-workers, friends, Lucas's extended family. But Lucas was crystal clear, standing under a driftwood arch, his navy suit perfect against the rugged backdrop. I felt a surge of strength with each step, not because I was alone, but because I was choosing this moment, this man, this life. The note, the breaks, my parents' absence. They couldn't take that from me, not unless I let them. The ceremony was everything we'd wanted. Intimate, raw, real. We wrote our own vows, promising to build a home rooted in kindness and respect, not status or wealth. Lucas's voice cracked as he said, "You make me want to be better, every single day." I laughed through tears, telling him, "You're already the best thing I never knew I needed." When we kissed, the guests cheered, and for a moment, I forgot the darkness lurking at the edges of the day. The reception was at the Salty Lobster, a waterfront shack with twinkle lights and lobster rolls that tasted like summer. Liam, a co-worker, snapped photos, capturing the laughter, the clinking glasses, the way Lucas spun me on the dance floor to an old Springsteen song. Clara gave a toast that had everyone in stitches, calling me the badass who saves lives and still makes time for terrible rom-coms. I danced with Robert for the father-daughter dance, his steady presence a reminder that family could be chosen, not just born. But the note was still there, buried in my purse, a ticking bomb I couldn't ignore. And the break lines, someone had tried to hurt me, maybe kill me. As the night wound down, I slipped outside to the deck, needing air. The ocean was black and endless, the stars sharp overhead. Clara found me, her heels clicking on the wood. "You okay, Em?" she asked, her voice soft but probing. I wanted to tell her everything, the note, the car, the way my parents' absence felt like a hole I couldn't fill. But before I could, my phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out, expecting a congratulatory text. Instead, it was an email sent from an anonymous account. The subject line was blank, but the body contained a single sentence. "You were warned. This is just the beginning." My stomach dropped. I scanned the deck, the parking lot, the shadows beyond the lights, but saw nothing. Clara noticed my face. "What's wrong?" she demanded. I hesitated, then showed her the email. Her eyes widened. "Emily, this is serious. You need to call the police, now." I shook my head. "Not tonight. I won't let this ruin our day." But even as I said it, I knew the truth. This wasn't over. Someone wanted to hurt me, and they weren't stopping. The note, the breaks, now this email. They were pieces of a puzzle I didn't understand. And my parents, with their casual cruelty, were only part of the storm closing in. As Lucas joined us on the deck, wrapping an arm around me, I forced a smile. He didn't know about the threats, and I wasn't ready to tell him, not when he looked so happy, so sure of our future. But as we said goodbye to the last guests and headed to our honeymoon cabin in the mountains, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The note had said I'd regret marrying Lucas, but what did they know that I didn't? And how far were they willing to go to make me pay? The reception at the Salty Lobster was fading into a warm blur of laughter and twinkle lights when I stepped outside to catch my breath. The ocean stretched black and endless before me, its rhythmic crash against Bar Harbor's rocky shore a stark contrast to the chaos in my head. I was Emily Harper, 32, a social worker who'd just married Lucas Bennett, the man who made my world make sense, but the threatening note, "Leave Lucas, or you'll regret it," still burned in my mind, tucked inside my purse like a grenade. The cut brake lines on Clara's SUV, nearly sending us plummeting off a cliff just hours ago, weren't a coincidence. Someone wanted to hurt me, and as I stood on the deck, the salt air sharp in my lungs, I felt eyes on me. Invisible, relentless, waiting. Clara's voice snapped me back. "Em, you're scaring me. What's with the email?" She held my phone, her eyes locked on the anonymous message. "You were warned. This is just the beginning." I took a shaky breath. The weight of the day, my parents' absence, the near crash, now this, pressing down like a storm cloud. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice targeting me. Clara's jaw tightened. "We're calling the police. This is beyond creepy." I shook my head, glancing at Lucas through the restaurant's window, laughing with his groomsmen. He didn't know about the note or the brakes, and I couldn't bear to shatter his joy. Not tonight. But the night wasn't done with me. As we left the reception, Lucas and I piled into his old Jeep, headed for our honeymoon cabin in Vermont, a cozy retreat in the Green Mountains, far from Bar Harbor's fog and secrets. The drive was quiet, his hand warm on mine, but my mind churned. Who sent the note? Was it tied to my parents, Margaret and Charles, who ditched my wedding for a Bahamas cruise with my brother Nathan's family? Their absence stung, but their words cut deeper. My father had called my wedding a footnote for someone irrelevant, dismissing me as a social worker scraping by. I'd spent my life chasing their approval, only to be reminded I'd never measure up to Nathan, their tech mogul golden boy. We reached the cabin just after midnight, the air crisp with pine and promise. Lucas carried me over the threshold, both of us laughing, and for a moment I let myself believe we could outrun the darkness. The cabin was perfect. Wood-paneled walls, a stone fireplace, a 4-poster bed draped in flannel. We collapsed onto the couch, still in our wedding clothes, and Lucas pulled me close. "Mrs. Bennett," he murmured, kissing my forehead. "How's it feel to be stuck with me?" I smiled, but the note's words echoed. "You'll regret it." I pushed it down, focusing on his warmth, his steady heartbeat. Tomorrow I'd deal with it. Tomorrow I'd be stronger. But tomorrow came too soon. At 3:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a call from Clara. "Em, get up," she said, her voice frantic. "Your apartment's on fire." My heart stopped. "What?" I sat up, waking Lucas, who blinked at me in confusion. "The fire department's there now," Clara said. "It started an hour ago. They don't know how bad it is. You need to get back." I was already moving, throwing on clothes, my hands shaking. Lucas grabbed the keys, his face pale. "What's happening?" he asked, but I could barely explain. My apartment, our home, where we'd built our life, was burning, and deep down, I knew this wasn't an accident. The drive back to Bar Harbor was a blur, the 4-hour trip shaved to 3 as Lucas pushed the Jeep to its limits. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky a bruised purple when we pulled into my street. The sight stole my breath. My apartment building, a charming Victorian split into 4 units, was a skeleton of charred wood and broken glass. Fire trucks lined the road, their lights flashing, and neighbors huddled in pajamas, whispering. Clara ran to me, her face streaked with soot. "It's bad, Em," she said, hugging me. "Your unit took the worst of it." I stared at the wreckage, my throat tight. Photos, journals, the quilt my grandmother made. Gone. Everything we hadn't packed for the honeymoon destroyed. The fire chief, a grizzled man named Tompkins, approached. "Miss Harper, we're still investigating, but it looks like the fire started in your unit. Electrical, maybe, but we found traces of an accelerant." My stomach dropped. "Accelerant?" I repeated, my voice hollow. He nodded grimly. "Could be arson. We'll know more after the lab results." Lucas's arm tightened around me, but I barely felt it. The note, the brakes, now this. Someone wasn't just threatening me. They were trying to erase me. We salvaged what we could, which wasn't much. A Singh jewelry box, a few scorched books, a cracked photo frame holding a picture of me and Lucas at a community fundraiser. Clara insisted we stay with her, and by noon we were at her loft, shell-shocked. Lucas finally asked the question I'd been dreading. "Em, what's going on? First the brakes, now this?" I couldn't hide it anymore. I showed him the note and the email, watching his face harden with each word. "Why wouldn't you tell me?" he demanded, hurt flashing in his eyes. "I didn't want to ruin our day," I said, tears spilling over. "But I'm scared, Lucas. Someone wants to hurt us." He pulled me into his arms, his voice fierce. "No one's touching you. We'll figure this out, together." But figuring it out was harder than I expected. The police took my statement, but with no suspects, they could only promise to investigate. Clara, ever the researcher, started digging into my work files, convinced the threats were tied to a case. As a social worker, I'd handled tough situations: abusive parents, neglected kids, angry families who blamed me for their problems. But nothing stood out, no clear enemy. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with a new email, this one from an anonymous account. "You can't run from the truth." Attached was a grainy photo of me at work, taken through a window, my face unaware and vulnerable. I dropped the phone, my heart pounding. They were watching me, even now. The next day, I returned to work, needing normalcy. My nonprofit, Coastal Hope, supported at-risk youth, and I'd just been promoted to lead a new crisis intervention program. But when I walked into the office, the mood was off. My colleagues avoided my eyes, and my boss, Diane, called me into her office. "Emily, we've received some troubling emails," she said, her face tight. "They claim you've been embezzling funds from the organization." My jaw dropped. "That's insane," I said, my voice shaking. "I've never touched a cent." She slid a printout across her desk. An anonymous email detailing supposed discrepancies in my program's budget, accusing me of siphoning thousands. "The board's launching an investigation," Diane said. "Until it's resolved, you're on administrative leave." I left her office in a daze, the accusation like a punch to the gut. Embezzlement. I'd spent years scraping by, pouring every ounce of myself into helping kids, and now this? As I packed my desk, I noticed a small package tucked behind my computer, wrapped in brown paper with no label. My hands trembled as I opened it, half expecting another threat. Inside was a single key, old and tarnished, with a tag that read, "You'll need this soon." No context, no sender. I shoved it into my pocket, my mind racing. Why were these packages showing up? What did they mean? Clara, who'd come to pick me up, saw my face and demanded answers. I showed her the key, and her eyes narrowed. "This is getting out of hand, Em. We need to find out who's behind this." Back at Clara's loft, I tried to focus, but my world was unraveling. The fire, the emails, the key, each felt like a thread in a web I couldn't see. And then there was my family. I hadn't heard from my parents since Margaret's text about their divine Bahamas trip, But that night I made the mistake of checking her Instagram. The post was a knife to the heart. A photo of her, Charles, Nathan, Sophia, and their kids on a pristine beach, captioned, "Perfect family getaway, nothing beats being together." The comments were worse. "Love seeing the whole Dawson clan," someone wrote. Margaret replied, "Couldn't ask for more." Not a word about me, their daughter who'd just gotten married. It was as if I didn't exist. I slammed my phone down, tears burning my eyes. Lucas found me curled on the couch, his face softening. "They don't deserve you," he said, pulling me close. "They never have." But his words couldn't erase the pain. I'd spent my life trying to earn their love, only to be erased from their perfect family. And it wasn't just emotional neglect. Years ago, I'd lent them $50,000, 0 cents, to save their beachfront home from foreclosure, a loan they'd promised to repay at $1,000, 0 cents a month. They'd paid faithfully until the wedding, but now 3 payments were missing. I'd sent emails, polite but firm, asking about the delay. No response. It was as if they thought my wedding had voided their obligation. The next morning, I started therapy with Dr. Larson, a recommendation from a colleague. Her office was a cozy space overlooking the harbor, with soft chairs and a view of sailboats bobbing in the mist. "You've experienced emotional abandonment your entire life," she said after I poured out my story. My parents' favoritism, Nathan's pedestal, the wedding betrayal. "Their absence at your wedding wasn't a mistake. It was a choice." Her words hit hard, but they also clarified something I'd always known. I wasn't the problem. They were. Therapy helped, but the threats didn't stop. One night, after a late shift at a temporary crisis hotline job, I was walking to my car when I heard footsteps behind me. The parking lot was dark, the streetlights flickering, and when I turned, a masked figure stood 20 feet away, motionless. My heart leapt to my throat. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice trembling. They didn't answer, just stepped closer, their silhouette tall and menacing. I fumbled for my keys, my hands slick with sweat, and sprinted to my car. As I peeled out, I saw them vanish into the shadows, leaving me shaking. I called Lucas, who met me at Clara's, his face pale with fury. "This has to stop," he said. "We're getting security cameras, a PI, whatever it takes." But the hits kept coming. A week after the stalking incident, a local news blog published a story, "Bar Harbor social worker under fire for alleged nonprofit fraud." My name, my photo, my life splashed across the internet, accusing me of stealing from the kids I'd dedicated my career to helping. The comments were brutal. "She's a disgrace. Lock her up." I felt like I was drowning, my reputation shredded by lies. Clara traced the story to an anonymous tip, likely the same source as the embezzlement emails. "Someone's orchestrating this," she said, her voice grim. "They want to destroy you." Amid the chaos, Lucas's parents, Susan and Robert, were a lifeline. They sent a heartfelt gift, a hand-carved wooden box engraved with our initials, filled with letters from their family welcoming me. "You're one of us," Susan wrote, and I cried reading it, grateful for their unconditional love. They invited us to dinner, cooked us meals, and checked in daily, a stark contrast to my own family's silence. Then my father called. I hadn't heard from him since before the wedding, and his voice was all business. "Emily, we need to talk about the money," he said, no greeting, no congratulations. "The $50,000, 0 cents, was a family gift. You're being unreasonable expecting repayment, and frankly, we need $10,000, 0 cents, more. Nathan's company is in trouble." I laughed, a bitter sound. "A gift?" "We signed a contract, Dad, notarized, and you've missed 3 payments. His tone hardened. "Don't be selfish. Nathan's firm is facing bankruptcy. He has kids to support." I gripped the phone, my anger boiling. And I have a life to live. You skipped my wedding, called it irrelevant, and now you're demanding more? I'm done being your ATM. I hung up, my hands shaking, but for the first time I felt powerful, not broken. My mother tried next, her voice dripping with guilt. How dare you threaten your father? Nathan's struggling, Emily. His company's laying off hundreds. They've had to pull Ava out of her academy. I cut her off. Struggling? They live in a $2 million 0-cents house. You chose a cruise over my wedding. Don't talk to me about family. She sighed, dramatic as ever. You've changed, Emily. You used to care about us. I ended the call, my resolve hardening. They'd always prioritized Nathan, but I was done accepting scraps. The pressure mounted when Sophia, Nathan's wife, called. You're ruining the Dawson legacy, she snapped. This loan nonsense is embarrassing. Think of Ava and Ethan. I didn't respond, too exhausted by their entitlement. But her words lingered, especially when I noticed a locked drawer in my father's study during a rare visit to their house years ago. What was he hiding? Financial records? Something tied to Nathan's firm? The question gnawed at me, a piece of the puzzle I couldn't place. Desperate for answers, I hired Rachel Cohen, a sharp lawyer recommended by Clara. Rachel reviewed the loan agreement, ironclad, notarized, no loopholes, and sent a demand letter to my parents, giving them 30 days to pay the overdue $3,000, 0 cents, and resume payments. The response was swift and ugly. Extended family flooded my phone with texts. You're heartless, Emily, from my aunt. Your parents paid for your degree, how dare you, from my uncle. I ignored them, but the guilt was a heavy weight, even as Dr. Larson reminded me, their discomfort isn't your responsibility. Then came the family meeting, set at a neutral hotel conference room in Portland. I insisted Lucas come and we agreed to a 1-hour limit, no backing down on the loan. The room was sterile, all beige walls and fluorescent lights, but the tension was electric. My parents sat across from us, Nathan and Sophia beside them, a united front. Charles opened, his voice clipped. This lawyer nonsense is a disgrace. We're family, Emily. You don't sue family. I slid copies of his emails across the table, my hands steady. You called the loan a gift after 3 years of payments. You suggested I coerced you. That's not family, that's manipulation. Nathan leaned forward, his face tight. You don't get it, Em. My company's collapsing. Mom and Dad are bailing me out. You're making it harder. Before I could respond, I took a sip of the water in front of me and a wave of dizziness hit. My vision blurred, my limbs heavy. Lucas noticed, grabbing my hand. Em, what's wrong? I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick. Clara, who'd insisted on coming, jumped up. Her drink! It's spiked! She knocked the glass over, the water pooling on the table. Chaos erupted. Nathan shouting. Sophia gasping. My parents frozen. Lucas carried me to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face until the fog lifted. Someone drugged you, he said, his voice shaking. We're leaving. We stumbled out, Clara calling the police as we went, my heart pounding. Who had access to my drink? One of them? A waiter? The same person behind the note? In the car, Lucas's anger boiled over. They're dangerous, Em. Your own family. I nodded, still woozy, but a new clarity was forming. The meeting wasn't just about the loan. It was a trap. Back at Clara's, we learned the police found traces of a sedative in the glass, but no fingerprints, no leads. The threats were escalating, and I was running out of time to figure out why. Then, a bombshell. Nathan texted me, his message short but shattering. I didn't know about the loan. They told me it was a bank loan. I stared at the words, my mind reeling. At the meeting, he'd been furious, turning on our parents. You lied to me, he'd said. You borrowed from Emily, a social worker, to save your house." Their guilty looks had confirmed it. They'd manipulated us both, pitting us against each other to keep control. Nathan's betrayal, however unintentional, shifted everything. For the first time, he saw our parents' favoritism for what it was: toxic, destructive. The next day, my job took another hit. Diane called, her voice cold. "The board's under pressure, Emily. Drop the loan dispute with your parents or we'll have to let you go." I was stunned. "You're punishing me for their lies?" She sighed. "It's about optics, the fraud allegations, the media. Your name's radioactive." I hung up, fury and fear warring inside me. My career, my passion, was slipping away and I couldn't stop it. But the final blow came a week later, as Lucas and I were rebuilding our lives. I'd been feeling off, nauseous, tired, and a drugstore test confirmed it. I was pregnant. Joy flooded me, but it was tangled with dread. My family would use this, demand reconciliation, claim rights to my child. Lucas held me, his eyes shining. "We're going to be parents," he said, kissing me, "and we'll protect this baby from them." I nodded, but the weight of their manipulation, the threats, the lies, pressed down. Who was the anonymous donor bailing out Nathan's firm, keeping it afloat despite bankruptcy? Was it tied to the threats? And what was in that locked drawer? As we planned our next steps, security cameras, a private investigator, a restraining order against my parents, Charles caved. Under Rachel's pressure, he agreed to repay the missed payments and resume the loan schedule, his pride visibly shattered. It was a victory, but a hollow one. The real fight was just beginning. Someone was still out there, watching, plotting. The key from the package sat on Clara's counter, a silent taunt. What did it unlock, and why did I feel like the answer would change everything? But in that moment, with Lucas beside me, our future growing inside me, I felt a spark of hope. I'd walked down the aisle alone, not broken but liberated. I'd faced fire, lies, and betrayal, and I was still standing. My family had tried to erase me, but I was rewriting my story, one choice at a time. Whoever was coming for me would learn I wasn't the irrelevant girl my father thought. I was Emily Harper, and I was done running.